Hello and welcome to the True Hearted Trainer podcast with me, Dr. Lisa. I'm your host. I'm a veterinarian and I'm also a DELTA accredited professional dog trainer. Now, welcome to episode 1. I'm very excited for you all to be here. And episode 1 is called Talk versus the Truth. And I wanted to welcome you to this very first episode with a quote from a very interesting human being called Dr. Robert Sapolsky. And the quote is simply, "An open mind is a prerequisite to an open heart." Now, I really like that quote because it just blends so nicely with the concept of dog training and communicating with our dog and trying to understand where our dog's coming from and how to communicate clearly and concisely with our dog without confusing or frustrating them. Now, my first commitment is to positive reinforcement and spreading that message. Now, positive reinforcement is simply setting your dog up for success because you're going to be rewarding your dog for performing desirable behaviours. And really, I also not just want to spread the word of positive reinforcement, but also talk about the journey of training with our dogs, not just focusing on the result. It's about becoming a reliable guardian, and I really think that quote, having an open mind, which is a prerequisite to having an open heart, really does set the framework for our training and our approach to training. It sets our intentions, and that leads me on to why I wanted to call the True Hearted Trainer podcast the name I've chosen. And that's basically because if we think about what true hearted means, we're talking about honesty and sincerity, being loyal and being faithful. And in my experience, I really didn't see that being reciprocated to our dogs by dog trainers across the globe, and even dog trainers just in my state of Queensland. Now, the topics that I want to raise over the course of the podcast and in different episodes to come are these sorts of topics that we really should be talking about. That's my bird Brucer in the background. I have given Brucer something to eat, some nice greens and some vegetables and some grevillea flowers, but he does love to sing, so that's fine. So I didn't really see that reciprocated to our dogs and under the umbrella of dog training. So I really wanted to raise topics that we really should be talking about, uncovering these and really calling out people who are calling themselves dog trainers without not having real science to back themselves up. We need to call those people out and, talk about it for really what it is. Particular people are actually calling themselves dog trainers without having the qualifications. And in some case, some people who are qualified haven't actually updated their skills for a number of years. And so they are still using things like punishment to train dogs. So I did get off the track there a little bit, but that does lead on to my next talking point, which is talking about the dog training industry. So it isn't regulated. Now, it's not a regulated industry. I'm going to say that again. The dog training industry is not regulated. So why is this a big deal? Well, it is a big deal because that means that anybody that doesn't have a qualification in dog training can actually call themselves a dog trainer and not be under any type of scrutiny from any regulatory body. There's no standard code of ethics that these people have to practice to. And because there's no regulatory body, then that means that trainers who aren't updating their skills and are still using punishment as a method of training for dogs, regardless of where they received their qualifications, if they're not updating their skills, then they're not up to date with current best practice. And sometimes being a member of specific professional organisations still is not a guarantee that you're going to be lucky enough to network and choose a positive reinforcement dog trainer to help you train your dog. Now, this is also a little bit worrying because there's a bit of a lack of transparency from my experience, and I really believe that if people are using punishment, then they should be saying that up front, because it leads into other areas of confusion. And I'm going to touch on a subset of trainers that call themselves balance trainers. Now, the name sounds really good, but it doesn't really say what it means. And once again, it's not transparent. So they do use positive reinforcement, but they also use punishment. And punishment can be anything from corrections on the lead, like jerking on a lead, verbal reprimands, finger pointing, putting their hands on the dogs to push them down into a sit position or to force them to actually comply with what they're wanting them to do, and basically not giving the dog a choice or even teaching the dog what it truly is that is expected of them in that training context. So, and I'd like to also touch on, you may actually see a lot of videos where we have the positive reinforcement trainers and the trainers who are actually using all quadrants of the training spectrum, and there will be links. Please have a look at the links in the description below. Everything I've talked about, we'll have a link there for you. Now, in all of these sort of videos where we have people talking about, the pros and cons of positive reinforcement trainers and, people who are using punishment techniques, punishment as a method of training, not once do I actually sort of hear a conversation about the body language of the dog in these types of situations. So nobody's paying attention to what the dog's trying to communicate to them. And very often in these situations where we're using punishment, well, I would say universally, and body language is going to be very different in the intensity and the communication signals that one dog compared to another dog is giving us in any situation. So we have to be vigilant for those things. But my point is that nowhere will you actually hear a discussion on the body language of the dogs and what they're actually telling us about the situation, that they're feeling stress, fear and anxiety in these situations where punishment is being used. So that's very worrying. And it also brings me on to an example of a puppy preschool class. I recently attended the Brisbane Dog Lovers Show back in November. What a wonderful weekend that was. I may actually do a video on that as well, because there's some things that I would like owners to really think about before, taking their dogs to public places like the Brisbane Dog Lovers Show. But let's stick to this example, this story. Now, a colleague of mine was telling me that this happened just very recently. It was in a puppy class. The trainer, I don't know what the qualifications were, but the trainer had said and made an example, took the collar of the leash of the puppy, pulled on the leash, jerked the puppy's head up so the puppy was actually up off its two front paws, and said, this is what you need to do if you want to control your dog. Now, to me, that's shocking. It's a welfare issue. It's a breach of that client's trust, because oftentimes owners don't know what to look for and how to critically evaluate a training method. But it is a breach of not only the client's trust in that situation, but also of the mental health and well-being of that little puppy in that situation. Now, this is not an isolated situation. It's happening everywhere across the globe. And I think we need to really talk about this and really ask ourselves, are we really promoting mental health and welfare when we're looking at these sorts of training techniques where punishment is being used. So no, we're not, because we're actually promoting stress, anxiety and fear in these dogs and these puppies if we're using punishment. Now, I do understand that the hardest thing to do for any owner is to be able to critically evaluate information when they're looking at when they're looking at dog trainers and how to choose a dog trainer. So I would say, look, if you have any issues and you're not sure, I think the best thing to do is go to a reputable positive reinforcement trainer website that is well recognised, and I would say have a look at the DELTA website if you're in Australia. If not, there should be an equivalent organisation in Europe or America, wherever you are. It's also a good idea to go to your local veterinarian, but I would also ask your vet questions, because not every vet has an interest or a special interest in behaviour, and that's absolutely fine. So if they're not sure of if there's a positive reinforcement trainer in your area, then just ask them if they can refer you on to somebody who does know, and that's perfectly fine. When we're talking about behaviour, you want to be able to be referred to the right place. For example, if you had an orthopaedic issue with your dog, you'd want to speak to a surgeon. So, it's no different with behaviour. You want to speak to somebody who has an interest in that, who'll be able to talk to you about the most current and up-to-date best practices in that field. Now, local vet, great. I would also recommend going to your local vet in the first instance as well, but also look at dog trainers, look at their website and look at their Facebook pages. What sort of posts are they putting up on their pages? Does it feel right? And it still might be very difficult to work out what is positive reinforcement training from a dog owner, just an everyday dog owner's point of view. But you can even ask them if you can attend a class, or give them a call and ask them questions. They should be able to provide you with information on exactly what they do, their qualifications, and whether they're just a positive reinforcement trainer. But the important thing is to ask questions, and I'm certainly happy for anybody to email me at info@vcabs.com.au. If you're not sure, I'd be happy to have a look at the website for you or the Facebook page and sort of critically evaluate it for you and let you know what maybe other questions you would be worthwhile asking that dog trainer before you approach them. And there's nothing wrong with asking questions. You're paying for a service, and when we're thinking about the service that we're wanting to purchase, that service is actually inherently linked to the mental health and well-being of our pet when we're looking at asking somebody into our lives to train our dogs with us and help us train our dogs. So now when we're looking at trainers as well, I think it's a really good idea, and I'm not sure, anybody who has, purchased a training session with just general trainers, I'd like to know your comments and your feedback on how the training session was broken down. I mean, did you have a really clear breakdown of what was going to be happening? Did you also get a summary in a written form along with homework exercises? That's really good, because you've got something written down, you've got a baseline to start with, and you can also use that for revision when you're actually, getting further and further in your training. But it's more about, and I want to harken back to the reason for wanting to train our dogs in the first place. It's positive reinforcement gives us so much more than just a way of training our dogs. It's a really, really wonderful technique, because it's not just a technique. To me, it's a lifestyle, because it helps me to be more proactive in looking at things from my dog's point of view, also observing my dog in everyday situations, understanding what my dog's trying to communicate with respect to their body language, from very obvious signs to the not so obvious signs. And your experience in training and just observing a dog gets so much more enhanced when you spend that time doing it. And so training is a partnership with your dog, not a dictatorship from my point of view. And that's the way I like to think about it. Now, also being able to observe your dog in everyday situations gives you the opportunity to understand your dog's point of view. It then also gives us an opportunity to have empathy for our dog in those situations, then understand what our dog might be going through in situations. For example, they may not be feeling comfortable in a situation where there's children around, noisy children or other dogs around. And so it's important for us to be able to understand that and act with a true heart in our dog's best interests, so we can intervene and then help to manage their behaviour in those everyday situations. Because the I would say the end point that everybody's looking for is just to be able to live with their dog in harmony. And really, it's up to us to make the first choice to understand our dog, so we can then be a true-hearted trainer and understand our dog and just have a wonderful training partnership and strengthen our human-dog bond. Now, it's a bit of a cliche, but it's true, and that's the greatest reward with positive reinforcement, in my opinion. So I'm not sure how long we've chatted for, well, I've chatted for, but I really did feel that it was a good idea to start the first episode in this way, talking about the talk versus the truth. And I'd like to thank you very much for watching, and stay tuned for updates on my next episode. I'm wanting to talk about changing the language to change the experience for our dogs. So that will be an interesting one. Got a few interesting talking points so far. But I'm going to leave this episode here because I'm waffling now. So just to thank you again very much for watching this very first episode of the True Hearted Trainer podcast with me, Dr. Lisa. And please feel free to like, share and subscribe for future episodes. And I'll also be having some live stream Q&A events on Facebook and possibly YouTube, if I can work out how to use the live stream feature on the YouTube channel, but we'll see how we go. So, and please find me on Facebook as well, and you can follow me on Instagram at The True Hearted Trainer. And I'd love to hear your comments on the first episode. Let me know about your experiences, and please email me if you have any questions, you're not too sure of where to start with positive reinforcement. You can also take a look at my other channel, Dr. Lisa Ackerman, with some handy tips on how to get started with positive reinforcement training. All right, well, thanks very much. Well, I've talked too much. We'll leave it here, and I'll see you next time. Thanks very much. And remember, stay positive. Thanks.